This is James Altucher at TheStreet.com TV here with Jim Cramer, and we're going to do a special lightning round where I'm going to ask Jim what he thinks of different bearish concepts. There's so many perma bears out there. Oh. I get angry, actually. I have to admit.
I think you should, because this is carelessness and recklessness masquerading as prudence and thoughtfulness.
Right.
Because you can't hate a market at 12 and 11 times earnings, because historically that's produced great gains, not losses.
But particularly with interest rates where they are at these lows.
And that's the other thing, the bearish concept that interest rates at 4.75 are too high. I got in when interest rates were 14%. I'm sorry, we're still anywhere between 4 and 5. Don't sweat the program.
Well, okay, so I'm going to play the devil's advocate, though, and I'm going to bring up the bearish case.
Okay.
Housing bust.
When I look at the housing companies, I am amazed that there are some that have already written down so much of their land that they're not even that dangerous anymore. Let me specify Centex and Toll Brothers. I think that there's winners and losers here. I would like to think that there would be a major housing company that goes bust, but their balance sheets are all pretty good. Historically, a housing bust has produced belly-up housing companies. I don't see that happening this time.
What about if if people start defaulting more, their houses are foreclosed on, there's just more inventory out there for sale? Could that have a future effect?
The throttle back in the build in housing is just extraordinary. What I would be more worried about is the federal government's policy to make it so that immigrants can't come here. That's been they've been the marginal buyers. That would make it tip more than the Alt-A problem that everybody's focused on.
Okay, well, inflation worries.
The Chinese are in control of commodities, so therefore, other than the corn complex, the ag complex, which we moved up because of our ethanol fixation, you can't stop commodity inflation if it's being driven by the Chinese. You can't. So inflation has got to be, the reason why we worry about inflation is what the Fed's going to do. But if the Fed is so misdirected as to look at the price of copper versus gold, and if the Fed's so misdirected as to look at the price of corn versus the price of your house, then we're going to be in a bind. I just think the Fed's not that stupid.
So what do you think is going to happen? And what stock would you play to take into account people's inflation worries? If
you're worried about inflation, then you should be buying Yamana Gold furiously here. $14 stock could go to $20 in that environment. And FCX, because it's got gold and copper. And I think it's worth $100. It's at $70.
Okay, what about the inverted yield curve? This has always been, people say this is a precursor to recession.
You're worried about the inverted yield curve, then you have to believe that all the numbers that we've had for the last year are phony. A lot of the banks have been, the ones that should have been annihilated by the inverted yield curve weren't. They just kind of bide their time. The BKX has done nothing. Historically, you should have been losing fortunes. People, again, aren't as dumb in the finance world about how to handle an inverted yield curve than they would have been 10 years ago. There's a lot of financial instruments that make that one really good.
Well, now, an inverted yield curve doesn't last forever. And
never does.
I heard you mention on Mad Money, though, you'd be skeptical of the regional banks given the inverted yield curve.
That's the only place, we finish up this lightning round and do some more, but the regional banks are overvalued versus the large money center banks and the brokers. That's all I'm saying. Swap out of 14 times earnings and go into 8.
Okay, well, I have some more to ask you, but we'll save it for part 2. Thanks very much. This is James Altucher at TheStreet.com TV.